Hello and welcome to ICA in Conversation that broadcasts on the second and fourth Wednesdays of each month, focusing on current issues and challenges in the context of compliance and counter financial crime. I'm Tim Tyler, and coming up, we're going to consider how compliance professionals can become more effective agents of change by moving from ideas and insight through to persuasion, partnership, and practical delivery. And we'll be using the 6 I's framework as a lens for that conversation. To do this, I'm delighted to be joined by Natalie Turner. Natalie is the creator of the 6 I's framework. She's an internationally recognized author, speaker, and advisor on innovation and leadership. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you. Delighted to be here, Tim.
Well, as ever, we'd love to hear from you wherever you are in the world as you join us. And we're mindful, of course, that many who will be listening to this will be listening to a recording available either through Apple or Spotify, through the ICA website, or through our members' learning resources. It's great that you can join us. I'm going to just talk briefly about what research says about the success of projects to, I hope, introduce the topic and highlight some of the challenges that, Natalie, you and I are going to be talking about. So 2 areas of research in particular. The Standish Group, Chaos Research, considered thousands of projects. And their core findings were that of the projects they considered, only 30 to 35% were successful, 45 to 50% were challenged, and by that they meant late, over budget, or reduced scope, and 15 to 20% failed outright. Now, that's supported by Bent Flyvberg of Oxford University, seen as a leading authority on mega projects. He analysed 16,000 major projects. What he saw was that only 8.5% met the time and budget requirements, and around 90% exceeded the budget, missed deadlines, or both. So maybe it's a little bit of a bleak way to start the conversation, Natalie. But are you surprised by those numbers? And can we use those as a springboard to talk about what good looks like?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And I actually, as you were saying, I was thinking, and maybe they were just normal projects, not projects that were dealing with high complexity and high stakes and innovation and everything else. Maybe they're a lot, it's probably up in the 90s in terms of failure rate. But yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, of course, that raises the question, what can we do about that?
Mm.
And where to begin? So I know you've done a great deal of research in this. You've developed a framework that you've written about and that you speak about internationally. It would be wonderful if we have the opportunity to talk through that framework.
Yeah.
And perhaps to start by thinking around, well, why? What's the genesis of this? What's the purpose of the framework?
Yeah. And I think, when I was thinking about this podcast today, I thought, let's think about why innovation, in a sense, in its broadest terms, is important to compliance. So I'd love to start with that because I've been thinking about it quite a lot in preparation for today. And then what we can do is segue then into the model itself, because I think if we give that context of how the industry and the profession is in a dynamic state of change right now, because it's important to understand relevance, isn't it? I mean, otherwise it's like, well, what is innovation? What does innovation even mean? So I'd like to sort of touch a little bit on that and get your thoughts on that, and then we can dive into the 6 I's, if
Sounds
that's
good.
okay, Tim.
Of
Yeah.
course. Yes, please do.
Um, so yeah, I've been thinking about, why does innovation matter for compliance professionals? Well, obviously the world's changing, and I think if we look at it traditionally, it's been very much as a control function, regulation, governance, risk, preventing harm. And of course, all of those responsibilities remain critical and very, very important. But layered on top of that now, we've got the whole sort of disruptive changes that are happening in the environment around AI, cyber risk, financial crime, data privacy, ESG requirements, and geopolitical change. And all of this is increasing in the regulatory environments that are becoming more and more complex. So that's why I was thinking, well, that's why, it's not like, we're in that steady state anymore. So it's not about even how to just remain compliant. It's how do we help organizations adapt responsibly to these changes, bringing in that expertise that professionals are holding. So
I
I
think
don't
it
know what
goes.
your thoughts are on that, Tim.
I think it goes
Yeah.
even deeper, actually. So you I think quite rightly highlight the disruption that we currently face geopolitically, economically. I think we can layer onto that the legal and regulatory changes which are unrelenting in this space. And then the technology, AI, my goodness,
Mm.
as a disruptor, I don't think any of
Mm.
us have really experienced anything at this level. And I'm not sure we really fully understand it yet for all the talk and noise.
Mm.
Um, and I think there's another layer to this, which I feel really strongly about, and I have to be careful not to. This is your event, not mine.
Mm.
But that is that I think historically compliance have been a bit risk averse.
Mm.
So some challenges require an innovative mindset, but regulators don't encourage innovation, really. I mean, some
Mm.
regulators will say they do, but the reality is if you put a foot out of line, you'll get punished for that. And so actually there's an incentive to stay quite risk averse, quite conservative, quite quite narrow in your focus. Innovation involves risk. Let's not take it. So
Mm.
there's a number of drivers in this space. But back to you, Natalie.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting too, because there's a lot of assumptions in there about what innovation is. Because innovation isn't just about light bulb moments and creative thinking and the imagination. I mean, we'll touch on this, but innovation requires such a raft of different skill sets, expertise, and mindsets to make things happen. And I think that we still have this sense of a very narrow view about what innovation is. And it's largely seen, and even more today, about technological disruption, even beyond R&D and product development. It's sort of associated with that space. So I think even to start with, it's like, let's unpack that. What does it mean to be innovative, and what does it mean in our respective professions to be innovative, to actually help to create value ultimately. And I think that, for compliance professionals, I think, you are really in a fascinating position, because you're having to balance protection and progress at the same time. Sort of, it's like this sort of straddling effect. And then holding that bridge and helping organizations manage the risk whilst allowing them to evolve, often at a speed now that maybe wasn't as fast in the past. So influencing change, not just advising on it, helping people to understand why things matter, and building trust across stakeholders and creating communication for action. These become even more important in the states that we're now operating in. So yes, I think it's an incredibly interesting time that we're all navigating together.
It is, and I think if I can say, without wanting to preempt too much the framework that we're going to come on to talk about, one of the things that I has attracted me to your framework is that it provides the architecture for leadership. What do I mean by that? Well, innovation requires, for me, it requires leadership. That's perhaps the single most important thing. That comes with the courage to make those decisions, and the decision might be, no, this is not working. We need to stop. We
Mm.
need to come back, try something else. It also needs collaboration, and all these things that we tend to associate with leadership qualities. But what you do is offer the architecture within which that can be implemented and brought to life. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to
All
talk
right.
about this. Should we jump in?
Yes, let's jump in. Let's jump in. That's
And I know
fantastic.
you've got a slide. So for those of us that are
Yeah,
listening to this after the event, we're going to share a slide now, but and we're going to describe it as we go along so that you're not too disadvantaged. But nonetheless, I think it is quite useful to map this out. So Natalie, what are you showing us at the moment for those
right.
that can't listen,
Yeah,
can't
absolutely. Well,
hear,
first of
see?
all, you'll see, well, for those who can't see, it's a circular model. I think traditionally, if you read a lot on innovation literature or theory, a lot of it is very much linear approaches, mostly around product development processes. Well, the reason that I created it back in 2009 was that I saw that a lot of innovation isn't even about product. And even, even more so today, we're talking a lot about processes, systems, policies, experience innovation, the things that don't fit in nice boxes that go through a stage gate approach and then pop out comes an innovation at the end. And also the innovation is one of the most human of processes itself, and it requires skill sets, mindsets, as well as a process. So we've got quite a lot of complexity, but in hopefully quite a simple model in terms of looking at it. You can sort of, get your head around it quite quickly. And I think, one of the main reasons I invented this was because I saw the organizations lacked a common language for discussing change. Different functions have different conversations, assumptions, measures, definitions of success. They have different perspectives. So this helps to sort of unpack some of that diversity and give us a language to explore it together to help people navigate uncertainty and change, and gives leaders, like you say, a practical framework from moving from opportunity and ideas right through to value creation, impact, and responsible change. And more importantly, or another important aspect, is that it helps people to understand everybody has a role to play. Everyone contributes differently because of their expertise, background, experience, ways of seeing the world, but that everybody is included. So it's a very inclusive model. It's not just for those creative people that sit out there somewhere, and the rest of us just get on with it and do the work. So I wanted to create something that was inclusive of very different type of skill sets. So shall we jump in and
Yes,
then
please
start to
do.
go
But
through them?
before we
Yeah.
do that, though, just for those that again who can't see, what I'm just going to describe what we're looking at here. We have six eyes, six. That's the six eye framework that are satellite to a single purpose. So the purpose is at the center of everything we'll be talking about, and satellite to it we have identify, ignite, investigate, invest, implement, and improve, which of course creates that cycle rather than seeing this as a linear progress. So where would you like to start in terms of, well, you've already started to unpack it, I think, in identifying the need
Yes.
and well, the purpose. Is that
Mm.
sufficiently well defined, or would you like to go further in
Yeah,
unpacking
absolutely.
that?
There's a reason purpose is at the center. I don't see it as a stage of innovation, but I see it as a starting point. And I think a lot of the time we don't even spend enough time thinking about purpose. And purpose can be multi-layered. It can be obviously our individual purpose about why we do something. It could be the team purpose, a project purpose, an organizational purpose. So you can have it at different layers, but it's really important because it starts with the question of why. Why are we trying to create whatever it is we're trying to create? So instead of starting with an idea, we start with, well, why does it matter? Because without purpose, what happens is teams get busy, there's lots of activity, and then people lose sight of why they're doing what they're doing. Or if they're brought in at a different stage of the journey of a project or an idea, they have no idea necessarily why they're even there. So actually understanding purpose creates team alignment straight away. And it's interesting, even just working with people with this, you can spend sometimes, half a day working out what the purpose is of the team and what they're trying to do. So this is really, really important, because we're asking questions: what matters here? What's changing? Who's going to be affected by this change, and why is it really needed right now? So that's why it's in the center. I call it the purpose pause. So if you're doing something, just come back, pause, and say, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? What is it we're trying to create? So that's in the center.
And just one quick question before we move on. Can that purpose change during the lifetime of a project?
Absolutely, it can. And actually, what I say is, as you work through the model, and it's not linear, it's not like you just go identify, ignite, investigate. It would be lovely if life was so easy, but it's not. It's iterative. So we can always go back to purpose. We say, has purpose changed? Now that we have more knowledge, now that we have more experience, now we've seen what our opportunities are, has the purpose changed? But at least you're consciously looking at purpose rather than just carrying on, to get the job done. Absolutely, yeah.
And that, of course, would require, if it was a formal project, that would require a reevaluation of potentially all the architecture around, well, does it now meet and serve the new purpose and so on? And do we need to reevaluate our goals, timescales, and so on? But but the important thing is it can change, but it needs to be, as you say, a deliberate, mindful change. But sorry, back to you, Natalie.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I'll do is I'll explain them in a linear way, if you like, starting with identify. But please remember, this is a circular approach to innovation. That means that we iterate. We may, identify opportunities, ignite ideas. Maybe then we'll go over to the improve stage to improve on what we're seeing, or so we're going to be jumping around in when we're working. But obviously, to understand it, I'll take it through in a sort of a sequential way. So I think what's important with identify, and each I, as you can see, or those who can't, is it's paired with a mindset. So there's a stage, and identify is pre-idea stage. It's that stage of opportunity. What are we looking at? What's changing in our environment? So here we're looking for changes, technological changes, environmental changes, regulatory changes, whatever it might be. And so innovation really begins with this curious mindset. It's about seeing what other people are missing in many ways. And I think for compliance, it would be, looking at what's emerging risks, what's changing in behavior, what shifts are happening in regulation, what developments are occurring that are shifting how we live, how we work, that are affecting the organization. Because there's so much information, as we know, out there. It's the challenge is, how do we make sense of it? So this is about sense making, recognizing patterns, recognizing trends, understanding what the implications of these opportunities might be. Now, for each of the I's, we also have a skill set acquired to it. So you may be a great identifier, and we measure that on a profiling instrument. So it helps people to understand their strengths, but also their biases. But I find with a lot of identifiers, they're often not always accepted in the organization because they're spotting the change, and the organization wants to work on what it's already working on, and so there can be quite a challenge for identifiers to communicate, this is what's happening now, this is what we need to do, we need to get ready to respond to these things that are changing in our environment. So this is where the identify stage is, very, very important in terms of, knowing what is changing and what needs to be addressed.
Makes sense. And there are some personality types that lend themselves perhaps to this particular role, and possibly other roles as well. But back to you.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the 6 I's, with the profile. It's more about what we measure on, and we've taken thousands of people through this, is that what skills do you perceive yourself to be good at? So it's not so much your personality. Your personality might influence your skills, of course, but it's not a personality assessment. It's more, what strengths do I think I have? Am I really good at spotting opportunities, understanding patterns? You know, those sorts of things is what we measure, particularly in this stage of identify. So anyway, let's move on to ignite, which I pair with the mindset of creativity. And this is often what people equate with innovation. You know, they say innovation equals ignite, and that's it. You know, but as you can see, there's a lot more going on than just the creative aspect. But creativity is important because it's where we get new ideas. You know, it's how we think differently, think laterally. So hearing, you know, the word creativity, you might not think necessarily compliance equals creativity, like you were saying about risk earlier, and innovation. Maybe it's the ignite piece that is often sort of resisted in some ways, you know, bringing in this new thing, this new way of working. But if we step back from that and think about professionally, we are problem solving all the time. You know, we're coming up with ideas and solutions and options. We're having to think about new ways of doing things. And I don't think that in compliance that's any less true. You know, it may be a different type of creativity to an artist or a writer or an inventor, but still having to problem solve, still having to create new ideas and new solutions. So this is a really important part of innovation, because this is where we bring in the new, we bring in the new ideas. And you don't want to have judgment in this phase, self-judgment, other judgment. And that's why it's difficult often, because we tend to want to jump in to start analyzing, can we do this? Who's going to do it? How are we going to do it? How are we going to resource it? You know, this phase needs that space, mental space, and trusting space in organizational life for people to be able to challenge assumptions, challenge what they do, challenge how they work, to be able to create that space for new things to emerge.
So you've mentioned there not only the skills, but also there's something around behaviors and building trust as an enabler for this. And I suspect that that's going to be an enabler for some of the other stages as well. Stages is the wrong term because that suggests a linearity, but trust is so important. And again, when we're thinking about ignite, I guess if I'm relating that back to the leadership model, here you're thinking about a vision. You're creating something that people can get excited about. It might be very low resolution, it might be early days, and that helps to get the collaboration, to get people working together. But back to you, sorry.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, the best ideas don't often occur when there's divergence, don't they? When there's difference, and there can, you know, a lot of the ignite energy. I often call it quite a strong energy. I give it the color red. You know, it's got that sort of passion behind it, and people can get very addicted to their own ideas. You know, with their own bias as well. So that's something that can become quite tricky, is to be able to then stand back and move on. And look at the investigate stage. So let's touch on that, because that's incredibly different. You know, identify curiosity, ignite creativity, investigate critical thinking. Critical thinking is very different from creative thinking, and it's very different from being curious. Well, I think you've got a degree of curiosity, but it maybe not as broad-minded. It's more about analyzing the parts of what you've got in front of you, you know. I think, you know, this is an area that is about testing assumptions. It's about evaluating evidence. It's understanding consequences. Risk would come here. All of that element of testing something to see, is it not just, you know, a good idea? Is it an idea worth investing in? You know, is it actually worth putting time, money, resource, people behind it? And you know, to innovate well requires thoughtful investigation, but we have to slow down a bit to do this, and that can be a challenge, because a lot of the time we're wanting to speed up, pace up, or other stakeholders might be wanting that. It's like, let's get this out there, and it's like, well, actually, we need, if we haven't really thought it through and we jump into implementation, then we're probably going to end up with a lot more project failure than we needed to have. Because if we did a good investigate stage, at least we know what risks, at least at that point in time, might be emerging that we can manage, rather than going in blindly. So it's a very important part and phase of the journey.
Makes Very good sense. I mean, there's one commentator you'd be familiar with who talks about think slow, act fast. And this is the
Mm,
think slow stage, isn't it? Where you're just, as you say, pausing, foot on the ball. No, actually, is this going to work? Let's not carried away. We've had the excitement. Well, now we just need to anchor ourselves to reality and the budget and all the key considerations. But then
yeah,
comes invest.
invest, which is paired with courage. So that's the mindset that I give with invest. So this is all about securing trust, leadership support, energy, resources to take our ideas forward. So this is a very different stage of the innovation journey. We need to influence people, we need to persuade, we need to build partnerships often now, far more than we did in the past. Yeah, it's that stage of innovation. It's not, as you probably can see here, it's not just about having a creative idea. This is also where a lot of good ideas fail, not because they're necessarily weak, but because they don't get enough sponsorship, trust, or commitment from the organization. And I've seen so much energy just dissipate at this stage of a journey of a project because priorities change, leaders change, shift changes. Everyone's gone on a journey and then boom, it's stopped. And then the whole organization or the project is moving in a different direction. So it's a really important phase because this is really where we get stakeholder buy-in and where we get the hopefully move into action to implementation through having that mindset of courage. So, and I think it's important to note there that the courageous mindset is required because we are not living in that steady state anymore. We wouldn't need courage if everything was easy. You only need courage if you're going to have to do something different and commit to something to move it forward. It's funny. I often call this the sort of the graveyard of ideas. I mean, it's not that funny because but it is what happens. It's not. This is where ideas go to die. Sadly, rest in peace. Great idea, just didn't get enough momentum, buy-in, resource, budget, whatever it might be, to back it. So a lot of time's
But
wasted.
but
Yeah,
so much better though than getting to the next stage, and only now do we come to implement, and then failing within the implementation stage. It's best,
yeah,
of course, if we don't allow it to go too far along this journey. That's in part what the investigate, if I understand it correctly. The investigate is there to try and look at the feasibility, the reality, how does it interact with the real world? Invest is kind of an endorsement of that, and can we get the backing for it? And um, by the time you get to implementation, there should be a level of confidence. But it's interesting, isn't it? We're only now fifth along the way.
mm.
Fifth thing we've talked
Yeah,
about is actually when we come to implementation. And I think one of the things you shared is that the danger is that we jump in to implement too quickly.
yeah. That's what people are hired to do, isn't it? We're hired to make things happen, to move things forward, to create outcomes, to produce. And so our brain is trained that way. It's like, okay, got that idea, right, let's do it. And we miss out these rich phases of thinking that could actually help our implementation had we done it or included
Yes,
those people that are really good at it. I think that's
yes.
often what can happen too, is if and this is why it's important as a leader to understand your strengths, because if you're an igniting leader and that's your bias and your strengths, you're going to stay there because you're comfortable there, you trust it, you trust being the person that comes up with the ideas, and you may not therefore value the investigator or value the implementer, or you may just want if you're an igniting implementer, you may just jump the investigation stage completely and just say, right, let's do this, let's move, because you're a strong leader and you're making change happen fast, and
And
then you go into a mess basically.
you're
And
standing
we
on
see that
the
happen.
bonnet of the Land Rover. You're stirring the troops. But of course,
Yeah,
and I wonder actually, as another layer of this, AI might actually compound these problems because AI has that tendency of, we'll ask it a question. Firstly, it'll tell us we're wonderful, and we're literally, we walk on water. There's nothing we can do that's wrong, and then it will start offering solutions way before. we're
Yeah.
actually ready, and we haven't done the hard work. And some of
Yeah.
the, I think Jung said that, beware wisdom if you haven't earned it. And if we can jump too quickly into solutions because they kind of appear on the surface, easy and
Yeah.
whatever, then we've lost something along the way. But we're running out of time. Perhaps we can move on to
Okay.
the sort of the secular, the sort of improve, which recognizes that this is very much a not a linear but a circular approach.
Absolutely. One thing I just want to say there too, that is innovation is a management discipline. If you can just take away one thing from today, innovation is a management discipline and a leadership practice. It's not just this ad hoc event that happens and on a Friday afternoon. It has to be managed properly. And so improve I pair with clever. So this is about really understanding how do we create value from what we already have. How can we look at things to say, how could this be done better, done differently? It's not just about a project review at the end of a project. It's about this constant going backwards and forwards to the mind of improvement. And I think it's important what you're saying about AI, because if you don't have the critical thinking ability to even judge what you're producing in AI, and you're just taking it out and it doesn't have any depth, it hasn't got anything, the substance that sits behind it, you can't even defend it, then you're not going to be able to use it successfully or wisely in your work. So this is really about that ongoing discipline of learning and adapting, because everything is going to be in a constant state of flux. As we know, evolving technology, regulations, and all of the whole, our whole space of life is just constantly changing. So this is really where we look at what are we learning, and putting that pause in again. What are we learning? I think we jump this phase, even in projects themselves, because we are always going constantly get into implementation. What are we learning, and what are we thinking, and what mindset are we in? Are we pairing the mindset with the stage or the phase of innovation that we're in? So compliance isn't just an outcome. I think it becomes an ongoing capability. And, it's really about helping organizations to become resilient and learn and adapt. And that is very much a thinking process.
Wonderful. So we've covered in a short period of time quite a wide range of qualities. And I think the one thing I go back to is, of these 6 areas, only one is focused on implement, highlighting, I think, the importance of taking care, taking time to do the hard work, to think through, to plan, to ignite the ideas, to create the options, then to challenge through critical thinking, get the investment right, whether that's in terms of collaboration, partnerships, time, energy, funds, cost, whatever it is. And then as we implement it, we're doing it with the right mindset and with some confidence that this is actually going to play out well. We have come to time, Natalie. Any final
Right.
thoughts before we bring this to a close?
I think my final thoughts are, most organizations don't fail because they've got a lack of ideas. They fail because there's no clear pathway from moving from insight into action, into implementation, into value creation. So the 6 I's is more than an innovation process. It's providing that language for navigating complexity, understanding strengths of individuals, teams, perspectives, collaborating more effectively, and creating more meaningful outcomes, ultimately helping organizations to create value responsibly and great impact in the world with clear purpose.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very, very well said. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you for your time and for your interest. Thank you, wherever you are joining us from today. Can I mention that on the 8th of July, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to be talking to Senator David Wells about trade and international trade and the ways in which we can mitigate against this being used as a vehicle for terrorist financing and money laundering. I hope you can join us then. But for the moment, thank you for today. And again, Natalie, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
interest.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.